Alright, we got us a 475W. I know I've done some of this before. I think I'm going to be redoing a whole bunch of videos because I got the camera up closer now. I can show some other things. So this is going to be one of them. So I'm putting an LS kit, which is a kit with clutches. I'm putting a pump bushing, case bushing. They sent me 2 pump bushings, so they are different. I don't know why they did that. This one doesn't really need it, but I'm going to show you the spiral snap ring that goes on the diode sprag of the reverse drum. Always put a Sonax overdrive servo pin in these. Almost always put a reverse servo in it. I almost always need a rear band. Almost always need a overdrive band. I almost always need a overdrive direct drum. If the splines ain't stripped out here, then it'll split right back here. Always needs a separator plate. There's a couple ways around this. You need to put the plate on it, which is what I do. Or I got a buddy that puts in the younger kit, and it's got one of these plugs that sits on top of the accumulator that kind of seals it off, but I always put the plate in it. There's 2 different plates. There's a KO 92 and there's a KO 192. The KO 92 has a bigger hole, and it tells you about it in here. The O192 has a normal size hole in it, and this is the one I recommend you put in, especially if you're doing a pickup truck. Because I was, before they had this plate, I was putting in the bigger hole one because that's all there was. And almost every customer was coming back complaining about a super slow 1-2 harsh shift. And it wasn't harsh, you could just feel it. And they didn't like it. Well, if you don't want that, then you put this plate that has the 073 hole in it, and you won't have that problem. I guess that's it. There's a few things we'll talk about along the way, I guess. And we'll get going on this. Well, here's another thing here. On these rear bands, these red line bands, or brown, whatever you want to call it. This one broke. But you can see how the lining wore off on the tips up here, and that's what it normally does. Right in here and here. It'll wear out. I can stop. I think that was it on that. And since we have the overdrive direct drum up here, we'll start off with it. You got this lip seal, lip goes down. Get you hook up your scribe up underneath there and make sure that lip's not rolled. Get you some lube up the drum and the lip seal. This is the piston that goes in there. A little check ball, make sure that you hear that rattle. Make sure it's nice and free. Lip faces up with this bottom part of the piston facing you, so the lip's going to face down when you put it in. Make sure it's not rolled. Get some more lube on there. I'm using Transgel Gold for the lip seals. I used the green for, this is actually a different company, but they make a green also. I use the green for holding bearings and check balls and such in place. If the spring cage goes in, these springs sit on top of these little bumps. If you look on your snap ring, there's a bevel to the tips. You want the bevel facing up. You got this washer with this lip faces down, goes around that snap ring. This bearing here faces up like that. This bearing and this bearing are bad about blowing up, so if you got quite a bit of miles on it, probably want to replace it. We'll start off with the steel. And then clutch, there's 6 clutches in this drum. And I have run into several instances, especially with these cheaper drums, where your clearance can be way off, especially if they send you the steels. I don't know where they're finding these steels at, but they're a lot thinner. So you gotta be real careful if you get a loaded drum especially from wit. That is where I seem to have the most trouble. But if you got extra stuff, it's easy to straighten that problem out. If you're not in the business though, you probably don't have the stuff around to get it taken care of. So you can see that there, but we're going to get that snap ring up against the top of that groove, and you can see the clearance there. It's probably about 80 thousandths, 60 thousandths, something like that. Let's see if we can get in beside there. See what we got here. It's 51. And we're probably around 60, 70. That's good. We got this bearing goes on the back side. Go with, see these tabs, they're going to face down. Just going to go up there just like that. Pay attention to this bushing right here, especially if this bearing blows up. Sometimes you can still salvage the planet if it didn't get up here and tear the planet up, the teeth on it. And you can buff this out smooth, take a grinder and grind a bevel back on here, drive the bushing out, comes out this way. And you don't want to go too far and hit that bearing that's on the inside when you put the new bushing in. Now I've only run into this one time, and if I remember right, it was on a regular AOD. It was a long time ago, but ever since then I've been checking them. I had one of these where I grabbed the planet and I went to do something with it, and it felt weird, and this piece back here was loose. So you can see this is welded pretty good on here, but I did have one that was loose, and it only happened one time, but it's something I check all the time now. since I had that happen. This is your low sprag. You can see these teeth right here face this way. And believe it or not, you would think that you can't get in backwards, but I guess where there's a will, there's a way. I have seen people do it. So the sprag goes in. It's the same as a 400 sprag. And the center support goes on top. Pay real close attention in here where the case lugs beat up against this. Been running into quite a few of these that are beat real bad. It's becoming a problem. It didn't used to have that problem, but I've been seeing a lot of them here lately. So when you get it in there, you got it'll turn counterclockwise and lock clockwise. When you get this out of the case, this is usually still on there. Unless somebody's rebuilt it before and thrown it away. Throw this away. All this does is seal the output shaft as it's coming down the assembly line. You don't need it. These sealing rings right here I keep, and I use them on my RO5As on the sun gear shaft. I never change any of the sealing rings on there except for these. I put these on there. Never use the sealing ring kit on an RE5 that comes in the kit. You're asking for trouble. There's some new rings on there. Just open them up just enough to get it on the shaft. You don't want to break them. Just kind of walk it around. Once you've done it a few times, it gets pretty easy. Check these in here. These later style ones have blue ones like this. They're solid. I never change these unless the shaft is just screwed up. The earlier ones it would be an orange color like this, and it would be scarf cut like that. Forward drum, you've got another check ball in there. Make sure it's free. These again have solid rings in here, and I guess I'll show this to you. I'll show it to you on the top one. I don't never change these either, but when you get a new drum, these are bad about splitting right here on the ring groove. And when you get a new drum, it'll come without this shaft, so you're going to press this shaft out and you're going to press it in.
What's up, man?
Okay, just for grins, I'm going to show you how I do this when you get the brand new drum, because it's not going to have these sealing rings on here if it does come with the shaft. Some of them come with the shaft, some don't. If it comes with the shaft, it ain't going to have sealing rings on it. If you got to reuse yours, then I don't change the rings ever. Well, let's just pretend it doesn't have rings on it. I take my ring and I make it wider, and I make it just wide enough that I can get the ring over the ring groove. Now on a lot of stuff I'll use a hose clamp to resize it. This one I don't need to do that if you're careful. The pump will do it for you, the pump stator. So I get that on there, get it where it needs to go, and I do one at a time. I'll do the bottom one first, and what I'll do is I'll squeeze it back in there where I get it somewhat back where it will stay somewhat in the groove, not be poking out so far. Then I'll center that up. Actually, first I'll lube it up. and I center it up until it's pretty center. And then I take my pump stator and take the I usually take these rings off because they get in the way and they're popping out. And then I just kind of push down with a little bit of pressure, turn in a little bit, and it pops right down. Now just leave that sit for a little bit. When I get done with this drum here, right now it's pretty much sized. But when I get my pump together, I'll set my drum down inside that, and I'll let it sit there until I'm ready to put it in the case. Bump this up just a little bit. This is the piston for the forward drum. You want the lip facing out towards you. Make sure it's not rolled. The inner lip seal, lip facing towards you. Lube it up. Now they do make lip seal tools for these drums. You don't really need them for this terrain. I just use this is a snap-on drawer lock tool. That's what I use for my lip seal tool. You can use a feeler gauge. You can use, some kits come with these lip wizards in them. You can use that. Anything that you get work around your lip seal that won't cut it. This return spring, your retainer, your tips of your snap ring, you want the taper up, and we're going to put it in between. We don't want that sitting like right there like that. You could do it like that. I'll put it over here. Alright. And we got our cushion plate. Some of them have a thin plate. Put a steel clutch. There's 5 clutches in here. They're slightly larger than the reverse clutches. They look identical. You got 2 flat snap rings that look almost identical. One is just ever so slightly larger. That's the forwards. And on the reverse drum, this sprag tends to blow up. This is a diode sprag. You can put the roller style sprag in there, and that's what I'll do if I need to replace the drum. I'll request a roller style one. You can put those in there just fine. I'm going to save this snap ring because I don't always put these retainers on there. I do if that snap ring is screwed up because they don't like to sell you that snap ring. You got this retainer. Superior makes this. Don't remember the number right off the top of my head. I'll put it in the description. It's got this recessed area that faces up. You got a spiral snap ring. Got an opening here, just like this. Just take an end of that, push it over a little bit. Start that down in that groove, and then we're just going to work it around. that's in there. Take a flat bladed screwdriver. I usually start where the opening is, and then you're just going to bend that over a little bit. It's going to keep that from being able to pop out. It ain't critical about how much you bend it. It just needs to be done in several spots. I don't know if I mentioned this. When you drive this shaft out, when you put it back in, this is going to sit almost flush, and this will be right at the bottom. When you drive this out, you'll see that there's a set of splines, there's a groove cut, and there's another set of splines. This is right at the bottom of that, where that groove is, where the splines start again. So it's not critical, or I haven't found it to be critical. Reverse gear. Go ahead and lube this up. Got a check ball again, make sure it's nice and free. These are flat cut, lathe cut seals, both the inside and out. And if you're going to cut one, this is probably the one that you're going to cut. It's got a pretty good bevel on it, and as long as you lube it up good and you go in straight, or pretty much straight, you shouldn't have a problem. And I just knock it in with the screwdriver. I get it somewhat down there started, and I just work it around. And you got this bevel plate, and this ring that goes on there. This ring has a split in it. You want that split to be in that area. And you got this big wavy snap ring. There again, I just get it started, and then I'll sometimes you have to use a hammer to do it. Sometimes I can get it in with just a screwdriver. Make sure we're all the way back. And you got this dish plate, or not dish plate, step plate, I guess, that goes down. There's a 3 clutch and a 4 clutch. I grabbed the wrong clutches. Yeah, I grabbed the wrong clutches. They look almost identical. The difference is the diameter of them. And on your steels, they have a opening. Keep the opening together on all your steels. And like I said, there's a 3 clutch and a 4 clutch. This one's a 3 clutch. And have different separator plates. And it should, normally it'll stay on the pressure plate which one it is. This one doesn't. Now you have two bearings in here that look almost identical. This one here, this goes on your output shaft. This one here without the notches goes right here on this drum. And if you get these mixed up, what's going to happen is you're going to bolt your pump down and nothing will turn. It just sits on there just like that. You got different sun gears and different bearing setups. This is a two-piece design, so I'm not sure what the measurements are on all of them. There's several different designs. You need to make sure all that stuff matches up. This one here is inch 164 for here, and it's got the ID mark right there, and that takes this style bearing. And you'll have, this is a non-magnetic drum so that the speed sensor will work. And you got this bearing with the step on it that goes down. This hub's going to go in there, and this bearing is going to go sitting in there like that, and the stub shaft's going to go in there. And drive my pump bushings out the front. The reason is, if you come out the back, a lot of times it'll leave a little burr out there. So I drive them out the front and I press them in from the front. And this is going to face in there just like that. And this little notch right here is going to face, make sure that our opening of our bushing is not in one of these areas right here. And we're going to put that in just right there, just like that. I'll be back. Okay, we want to go down far enough that we're not blocking the drain back hole, but we're not too far out the back that we're hitting the gear. I'm going to stake the bushing in place. We're going to take some 3M weather stripping adhesive, that yellow stuff. I always call it Gorilla Snot. Just put a little bit around there. Put our pump O-ring on. I usually mark all my gears before I take them out. These is not that big of a deal. It doesn't matter which way the outer gear goes. The inner gear has this bevel, faces down towards the torque converter. There are 3 holes here. I'm going to measure 3 holes here. It'll only go in one way, so you can't screw it up. 5-10 millimeters. Pull our bottom snap ring, snapping our sealing rings off. Now you can stick a scrap in there and break these little tips where they're held together, but if you don't do this all the time and you happen to break one of these snap ring or sealing rings, I keep wanting to call them snap rings, one of these sealing rings off, trying to get the new ones on, and you're not going to have nothing. If you don't break these taking them off, you've got a backup. Now these pump washers are numbered. I don't know if it's showing up on the camera. There's a number right there, number 3. Most of them are this natural color, number 3. And this tab's going to sit right there. Early style pumps, these 2 sealing rings here are metal also. Late style ones are butt cut, and they're this Delron, or I don't know what kind of material it is. It's a plastic of some sort. They go up there, and then your 2 metal ones go in the bottom. Like I said, just open it up just enough to get the snap ring started and just kind of walk it down. Up where the piston goes. You get this bleed hole in your piston, whether it's the early ones is aluminum, and it's got lip seals on it, and it's got a spring cage that goes up here. This late style is just a molded piston, but that bleed hole lines up with that right there. Then you got this cushion ring, and this metal ring is going to go on top. But I'm going to set this on the drums and let these size until we're ready for them. So that's good to go there. There's the clutches over here. Alright, I'm going to change battery and the camera. And I got to change the camera to over the transmission. It's going to be further away. That's the best I can do. We'll be back. Alright, before I go changing camera angles, let's see which lug it is. I believe it's this one over here. I don't have it in the case. This is the anti-clunk spring that they got for the late ones, and it'll sit in here. It's supposed to help keep it from beating into the case and eating it up. The early one is shaped like this, but instead of having the straight end right here, this end would be bent over this way like this one is, except for this way. That's the early style. This is like a, I think TechPak Fitzall makes this thing, and what it's for is when it starts eating into the case, it'll get stuck. So what they did is they made this thing, and actually I think it sits on this lug. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your cutoff wheel and your cutoff wheel, and you're going to grind you a little groove that this is going to pop down into, and it's going to sit in there just like that. I don't hardly ever put these in. I just replace the center support. They're not that much. Either way you want to go, you can do that. The other thing we need to do while we can see pretty well and the camera is close and do this Sonic servo. And they didn't used to give you the clip in the kit, but then in the rebuild kits they started putting the clip in. But what would happen is right on the factory clip, let me go ahead and pull it off. You just take a scribe or a little pocket screwdriver, whatever, pop it off. This little tip right here would break off right there, and it goes straight into the valve body, and I'll show you the valve that hangs. And you can fix this in the car if you don't drive it too long and burn everything up. And people say you can't because you unload the band when you take the servo out, and that's true. But if you are very careful and you have a little foresight, you can put something in there to keep that band from popping down, and I'll show you what to do. And I don't normally put them together this way, but I'll show you what you can do. The little O-ring goes there, big O-ring goes here. I got this little shim here that you can put on. I never put those on. You got the spring. These springs are fairly bad about breaking, so I just, if I ever have to replace a servo, I keep this spring. So I got a backup. Trying to get some of these parts places to get you stuff that they don't normally sell. They want to act really stupid about stuff. And then I just push it down a little bit, start it in the groove, get you a pair of pliers, and just push it down a little bit. Pop it in place, and this spring is going to sit on top. So I go ahead and I lube up this O-ring so it slides easy. Put some green grease on there. Just, you don't have to do that. And right now I'm going to change camera angles. Snap-on redesigned the screwdriver, and it really sucks since they redesigned it, because a lot of things I could do with it I can't no longer do. The number on it is an SGD 424B. Still the closest thing I've found to what it used to be. It used to be a little wider down here, and it was much better for doing what I need to do. But you need to deal with what you got to deal with. Now if you look on the bushing where I said before it's got a split to it, you can see where it's put together. You're going to want to try to find that on that old bushing, and it makes it easier. You don't have to find it, but it makes it easier. And I find that, and I'm not always right, but I generally pretty much get it. Find that where that opening is. I'm going to put that snap ring or the screwdriver between the bushing and the case. I'm going to drive it in. Yeah, this was my first guess over here, but I saw that really looked like an opening over on the other side. It was much more pronounced, and I was wrong. Usually when you start driving on it, you'll see where the opening really is. Just find that, you're going to split that bushing and it'll come right out. This bushing, in my opinion, you need to replace no matter what. Even more important to me than the pump bushing. The reason being is that back here in the back, where these sealing rings ride, when this bushing starts getting wore out, and every one of them's wore out, it'll start ring cutting this back here. Now you can fix it and make a tool that you can bore this out, and you can put a oversized sleeve in it It's no big deal, but it's going to add about almost an hour to your build time. If you don't have that tool, you're buying a case. I don't have to do it hardly ever, and one of the reasons I don't have to do it when one comes back I've had some that's come back several years later, 6-7 years later, they're still not ring cut, and the reason they're not ring cut is because I put this bushing in. I guarantee you don't put this bushing in, it will be back ring cut. Don't know who makes the bushing driver. Bought it from TransStar. I just put the bushing down there to where it's somewhat centered. I have to do some work on this thing. And get my bushing driver. Make sure it's kind of straight. Just drive it in flush. And you gotta be careful when you're doing this because the park pawl pin and park pawl and spring might fall out when you smack the case. So reach down there and put it back in. And I find a bushing driver that fits down inside the bushing. I'm going to drive it just below flush. Don't go all the way down. Alright. And we're going to put this bearing in that has the cutouts. And our output shaft. Also on the early ones there'll be teeth cut into here for the speedometer gear, and there's different tooth counts. There's different length shafts. Some of them aren't splined all the way up to here. Your van ones are going to be splined all the way to here, and if you put an output shaft in that's only splined to there, you're not going to be able to get your output shaft, your drive shaft into the van. So pay attention to everything when you swap it out. Make sure it's turning nice and free. If it's really stiff, because sometimes it is, if you get cocked on the bushing, it'll get a little stiff. Just try to get it in there as best you can, down as much as you can, and then I just take either a rubber mallet or I take this dead blow, and I just smack the output shaft 3 or 4 different directions, and usually it'll free it up. And we're going to put overdrive direct drum, make sure that the bearing's on the back of it. You got this flat snap ring, goes down, sits on that little ledge down there, and your rear band goes in with the opening over here. Alright, the early units did not have the speed sensor that goes on the side over here that sticks in that little hole right there. That's what this cutout is for, so it wouldn't be there on the early ones. They just have this cutout. You can use the other one. If that's all you can find, just take and notch this out for the speed sensor over here, and it'll work fine. Alright, turn that until it drops all the way down. I'm going to take that rattle clip and put it in this groove right up here. And sometimes it can be difficult to get it to stay in there, because it'll want to cock and pop out. Just a little bit of force will be too much. Just want to get it to stay in there. The early center support snap rings had two ends that looked like that. They're folded up, and they would go at the 11 o'clock and at the 8 o'clock. The one that has the speed sensor only has the one tab, and you can take the other one and just cut it off and make it work. And then the opening is going to be about the 4 o'clock, and then it's going to be past where the speed sensor comes in. Got our sun gear with the washer and bearing. Sun shell. The early ones were steel. You can use this sun shell, a non-magnetic one, on all the way back if you wanted to. The deal is it's much more expensive. So then we got the bearing on top like we showed, the hub, this bearing, and the shaft. Forward and reverse drums. Make sure they're down. You should hear a real solid metal sound. And we got our overdrive band. And normally what I would do right now is I would put the overdrive servo in, but I'm going to show you how we can do it, because you see how it is right now. If I take this off, I'm going to shove that in. I don't know if you can see. Down in there. The servo is missing the band. And when you take the servo out in the vehicle, that's what's going to happen, is the band's going to pop over. So what we're going to do is we're going to go up in here, in this hole right here, when the band is out. And I'm going to show it to you in a minute. It'll be a little bit more clear. We're going to go up in this hole, and we're going to push on this band. Well, sometimes with the scribe is better. We got 2 scribes. It's even better. Get you a screwdriver and go up in here, and there's a hole in this band. We're going to push that over. We're going to go up in where the servo was. We're going to push that where it's up solid. We're going to take a screwdriver. It's better if you got 2 people. You can get somebody to hold that screwdriver right there, pushing on that band, and then you can put your servo in. Let's see, I'll turn this, hopefully the drum won't fall out. We're going through this hole right here. We're just pushing on that enough. Yeah, keep falling on. We're going to get up in there. I'm going to hold that, and we're going to stick that in there just like that. And we're going to put our servo in. And with the tool I got, it's a lot easier. You don't have to have the tool. If it's in the vehicle, you can use 2 people. You can get something you can push on here when somebody else put the snap ring in. But tool, they make, I'm sure somebody else makes it by now, but I made my own. What I did, and I showed this in the other video. This is the 350 700 low reverse tool for doing the piston in the back of the case. And normally this was just welded on the end here, and so this wouldn't come off. I just ground that off so that I could get I could get this off, and I drilled and tapped so that I could screw this back on. And what I did is I used a 10mm headed bolt, and I screw that back down in there. And then at the time I had a guy's really cool guy that had he's a retired machinist, and I used to know a lot of machinists. I was a machinist for a while, and I took the measurements and I just took it over to him and had him drill it out. It's much quicker than me doing it because it's pretty hard steel, but you can do it yourself. It ain't that big of a deal. So what we're doing is we're going to go off of this bolt, and this bolt, and go off of the end here. It's 711 thousandths to the outside of the hole to the outside here, and this is like a 1/4 inch hole. Yeah, it's 2/624. And then this end is 361 thousandths, and it's the same size hole. So what I did is I take, you got long and short valve body bolts, and I screw this out till it's almost out. Put the short end over here. Put this end over here, and then we're just going to use this to push the servo in and make sure that that is up over there, and then just screw it in enough to get the snap ring in. I didn't used to put the snap rings in the kit, and they were bad about breaking too. And there's a little video, I made a video on how to get this snap ring out of there if both ends break off. If one end breaks off, I can usually get in there with these pliers, and I can grab a hold of it. I use that to push the servo down so there's no pressure on it, and then I can get on the end of it here and usually grab it and just kind of leverage it out. But if both ends are broke off, watch that video and it'll show you how to get it out. And there again, there's a taper to these. You want to put the taper facing out towards you. Then you got this pressure plate. Its openings can go this way. 4 clutches. I'm going to end with the steel on top. Now the early ones did not have this this little clip right here. It goes in facing that way. So this little ledge is going to sit on top of that pressure plate. Just like that. The early ones did not have this set up here. Like I said, they had the return spring on the piston itself that snapped around the pump body. Usually when you take that off, it bends those tabs out. Just take a screwdriver and kind of beat those tabs back in once you click it into place, and it'll be fine. Alright, we got this opening right here. It's got a face over here. And then we're going to put these openings down at the bottom. They only go in one way, or line up one way. $10 millimeters. Our drum turns. Make sure our in play is good. Here's the pivot pin, park actuator, and the spring in case it pops out. The spring fits right in there, loops right on the case here. Got to get underneath the park rod, and then it ain't gonna work. Get your pair of dikes. I guess you can see just fine. Pull this pin out right here. 13/16. And depending on how many miles this vehicle has is whether I'll replace the EPC solenoid. Start getting around 200,000. In my opinion, it needs to be replaced. There's early and late. This is the late one. It's got the screen right here. The early one would not have that. I'm going to take this out to the wire wheel. I'm going to buff all this rust off. You got to be careful if these are really rusted, then your neutral switch is not going to work right anymore. And I've got a baby heel bar made by Snap-on. I don't know what the number is. So hard to see now. 650. And I just get in behind the seal and just pop it out. The harder they are, the harder it is to get out. You got the new seal. It's got an end that looks like that. One that looks like that. It goes in just like that. Let's put some lube on it. Put it in flush. So got it all buffed off. Now some of the early ones, there would be a lever out here for your rod to hook to for your shifter. Pay close attention to which way that came out. Otherwise you're taking it all back apart just to flip it around. Just get it tight enough. You don't have to go super tight. Just drive the pin in until it's below where the pan rail is, so the pan's going to push it in. You don't need to drive it down as far as just as hard as you can. Here's this screen here. When I'm putting them together on the bench like this, I'll go ahead and put it in. If I have to take the valve body off in the car, I just pitch it in the trash. When you pull the pan off, most times you're going to find this. You'd be surprised how many transmissions have been sold. All this is to stick it in the filler tube hole when it's coming down the assembly line at the Ford plant, and it's to keep fluid from coming out there, and they shove the filler tube in and it shoves it into the pan. This means that this pan has never been off before, or somebody stuck it, just left it in the pan when they changed the fluid. Got this spring here, goes on the servo, our new servo. And I got a lot of people that tell me you have to replace this servo cover when you replace a servo. I hardly ever replace this cover unless it's just ripped to pieces. And I don't normally have any problems. I have never had any problems. Get it down below the snap ring groove there, kind of start it in. Pay attention to your accumulators here. These do delaminate, especially if there's been water in the unit. As long as they're nice and supple and don't show any signs of delamination, I reuse them. If you look, there's two springs in here that are pretty similar. Use the one over here that will not fit inside this spring. So this one goes here, this one goes here. So usually this one, they're different color for different years and different vehicles. Usually on your Ford trucks this is green, and then you got a yellow and a white on top here. I've seen all kinds. You can do it however. I haven't seen it to make too much of a difference unless you get too radical with it. This cap goes on top. I've seen these delaminate too. This has got a taper on the tips. It goes up. This goes on top. This is where that little piece would fit if you got the younger kit. I think I got one. It's the same thing, but usually they're brass. It's this little dude right here, and that would sit on top just like that. And it kind of tends to take up the crack. Every one of these plates is cracked if you'll look. This plate sits down here, right here. You look right there, every single plate will have a crack in it. Now this Sonax plate, this Sonax, right? Or Superior plate. They give you one of these also, but it's a much smaller one. And it sits right on top right there. Alright, I'm going to go get the valve body. I'm going to change camera angles again so you can see this. What we got here is where this little clip would go. This valve would be stuck back like that, and that little clip would be right down in here. There may be several pieces of it. So what I normally do is I just get the screwdriver in there just like that, put some backward pressure, blow some air down in there, and get all the chunks out, and then usually it'll pop right back. So make sure all your valves are free. These two, actually three. This one is super critical. Normally, if any's going to be stuck, it's going to be this one and this one, maybe this one. And if that snap ring gets up in there, that one will be stuck. So just make sure they're nice and free. And then I've gotten to where even if this other one, this one here is free, which it is. It's pretty free. I might leave it alone, but to show you what needs to be done, I'm going to take it out. And I've gotten to where I do this almost all the time. You ever get one, especially after you rebuild it, and you pull up to a red light and it falls to neutral, you give it a little gas and it bangs back into the gear. This valve right here more than likely is stuck. So I've gotten to where I pretty much just resize this thing no matter what. This one's really free. It would probably have been just fine. But this one loves to stick. And this is Sonic's tool number 76948-BST2. And I just got a little bolt that'll screw into the back of it because it's got threads. And this bore sizer just going to resize that hole. So I just get a little lube, put on it, stick it up in that hole, get it to where it started pretty straight, and we drive it in until it's flush all the way down. Pretty sticky. It probably needed this anyway. It's fitting pretty tight. So we got that in there. It's all the way down. See that down in the bottom of the bore. Right there. And I got a slide hammer from a pilot bearing remover set from Snap-on, and this is their tool number CJ93-68, their attachment. It screws onto the slide hammer. Looks like there's two different numbers. Number on the handle, CJ93-1 and CJ125-6. Anyhow, get those little claws right there. Blow the hole out. Blow the valve off. Put some lube on it, and this is just air coil. You can use PV Blast. Just put the valve in. I guess I showed you the end that needs to go in first. come on now. Alright, it goes in just like that. Spring. Clip with the notch facing down. This little tool I got from one of the seminars I went to. They had it laying out on the table. And this is a pretty nifty little tool. Got it for free. And I don't remember who I got it from. Judging from the color of it, I would say TechPak, Fitzall. But it don't have part number or nothing on it, so can't help you there. And this little doohickey goes up here in this spot. From the factory, they got a filter that goes down here. It looks like that. You get it in the kit, throw it away. Alright, we got 8 check balls. I recommend they give them to you, just replace them new. Here's this E-clip that goes on that overdrive servo they started giving you. Alright, 1 ball, 2 ball, 3 ball, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Early style plates, they're valve bodies. If you're using this this replacement plate from Superior, it's got this hole right here. You need to have the gasket that's got the hole in it if they give you a kit that's got 2 different gaskets in it. Because the early plates didn't have a hole here, and it would have an extra one of these back here. And you didn't need this stiffer plate that they didn't crack, because they had that plate back here that accumulator would work off of, and it wouldn't beat a hole on the plate. But you look, I've never seen a plate that wasn't cracked. And 9 bolts back here, and 10 millimeters. You don't have to get super tight. Gasket. It's the same gasket no matter what year you had. Always had this green stripe. On this plate right here, I never take this plate off. This one is not too bad, but the early ones are super bad. The early ones were a real thick gasket here, and it had a lot of rubber on it. And if you happen to be unfortunate enough to replace this thing, you ended up with problems. So I never find the need. I've taken it off a couple times. Like I said, the one with the thin gasket, you don't have any problems. But the early ones, you do. If you're going to take it off on the early ones, you're going to need to bolt this down, walk away for about 30 minutes, come back, tighten it down again. Then you're going to need to go drive it, get it hot, let it cool down, come back, pull the pan, tighten this down again, go out, drive it, get it hot, bring it back, let it cool down, tighten it again. And you're probably going to have to do that 2 or 3 times. So my advice to you, don't change it. Alright. what I normally do. Grab it just like that, put the front end down first in the hole it goes in. These two bolts here have little extend out past. They line up here and here. Line up your manual valve, and then just let it drop. You got this bracket here for your EPC. They're different from early and late. You don't want to mix those up. Like I said, you got short bolts and long bolts. Long bolts go on this metal plate, and the short bolts go everywhere else. Not a bad idea to change shift solenoids, especially getting higher mileage. Leave this off. Do that one last. You got two speed sensors that come in from the side. This is the intermediate speed sensor. And it's got a long 8mm. Your output speed sensor. There's early and late. It goes in the back. And it's a short 8. From the center out. Our detent. This notch fits around the notch on the valve body. Put it in the center. Now the early ones had wires that came across here and plugged into everything, and the super late ones got them also. The in between had this hard wire. And especially if you're changing this hard wire, you got to pay close attention to whether it really plugged into the EPC solenoid or not, because it'll feel like it did and it didn't. So just pull up on it, and if it won't come back off, then you're on. That should change those O-rings. Yeah. I'll go back and do it. Just noticed I did not get my filter. Let's see what else I didn't get. I'll be back. Alright, we're back. I can go ahead and change the shift solenoid. 10mm up here. And the 8 back here. And put our wire back on. Make sure we're on good. Yeah. A lot of times what's going to happen is you're not going to get that plugged in all the way. You're going to think you did and you didn't. And you're going to get EPC solenoid code. The only other time you're going to get an EPC solenoid code that I've run into is when the wiring harness is shorted out, where it comes off the tranny, goes across the bell housing where the filler tube is at. When this tranny is out, I always try to make it imperative to these guys, check that wiring harness while the tranny is out. It's easy to fix. If there's any problem, any of that insulation is missing, any of that conduit, replace that stuff. Take things back to where they need to be. If any of the stuff that keeps it off the exhaust and the filler tube is missing, find some way to tie that stuff up. And what you'll find is this problem with the EPC solenoid is right where it goes across the top of the bell housing, right where the filler tube comes in. That's where it shorts out, and that's what's going to give you your EPC solenoid code. Almost all these are 4x4 filters, even though they're two-wheel drive. I'll show you the pan in a second. I have a new guy in here that we had one of these trucks come in. I guess it's been about 2 weeks ago now, and it had the EPC solenoid code, and I told him the wiring harness is shorted out exactly where I told you it was. And he goes out there and he screws around, messes around. He said, I don't see nothing wrong with the wiring harness. So I walked out there. He had the truck in the air. It was missing the conduit all the way from the neutral switch all the way, almost all the way up. And I said, well, that's a problem right there. And then I looked right up beside the filler tube, and you look right up there. I said, there's your problem right there. And he argued with me for 2 days on that damn thing before he finally pulled the harness up out of there and saw the problem, fixed it, put new conduit on it. The truck went away. In your kit, you're going to get a paper gasket. This little piece of crap right here. Throw it away. That's what you get in your kit. Reuse the reusable gasket. You can buy a kit that's got one in it if you want to. These are, unless it's just destroyed, these work just fine. $10mm on the pan. This little hump here takes a 4x4 filter. About the only ones that you're going to get that don't take a 4x4 filter are going to be like Mustangs and stuff like that, and it'll be flat across here. Two different tail housing gaskets. This is the real late style, and it takes different bolts on the back. Make sure your bushing's in good shape, because now's the time to change it, unless you got the tool that you can pull it out in the car. Otherwise you're pulling a cross member out to get it out. The studs go up here in the top, usually. If it's only got one, it usually goes over here. Not always. You can't see it, but there would have been a spot right here for where the speedometer goes. It's cast off because the late ones don't have it. Only the early ones did. And on your early trannies, there was a AODE and there's a 470W, and then there's a 475W, and then there's the 475E. I think they're calling the E's the ones that take to the other gasket. I don't know that for a fact. Other than that, they're identical. But the AODE smaller rear seal here is the same as the 350. Other than that, I believe we're good to go. There's our filler tube O-ring. Since we don't got a speedo, that's all I need to worry about.